announces the arrival of the official from St. Petersburg. Now, this leaves the government officials in shock, okay, because they realized the government inspector who they thought was the government inspector, Elestikov, is not it. But with this news, now they are shocked. They need to go and meet the real government inspector. Now, we talked about elements of plot. We talked about the plot itself. I mean, elements of the story, sorry. We talked about the plot. Now we also need to talk about the conflicts. Remember, I mentioned from the exposition to the rising action before the climax, we have introduction of characters and conflicts, and they build up to the crisis. Now, let's look at the conflicts. What type of conflicts do characters encounter, and what is a conflict? So we will use this definition. A conflict is a struggle or encounter within the plot of the opposing forces that create an interest in the reader or audience. So in a story, as we said, we expect conflicts between the exposition and the climax. For example, in the government inspector, Helestikov's true identity as he's introduced and makes that decision, that becomes a conflict. Now, the question we have all throughout the story until he disappears from the stage or from the story, we keep on asking, will his true identity become clear to the mayor or the other civil servants? So we talked about conflict being a struggle between two opposing forces. Now let's look at the type of struggles that characters go through. The first one, we have character versus character. A character faces a problem caused by another character. So between people, between a person and an animal, so character versus character. Examples, Wiza versus Yona for the love of Everilda during the Jets fair. Another example, Wayaki versus the society for his love for Nyambura, the uncircumcised girl in the river between. Medza versus his father in being told he should marry Edima because he failed in school. He didn't manage to finish and he came back home. So that's a conflict he has with his father. From character to character, we look for another type of conflict. Here we have character versus a force of nature. The force of nature could be weather, famine, even a supernatural force. For example, the boys versus the beast in The Lord of the Flies. Now, in The Lord of the Flies, the beast takes on three different forms. The first form is a snake thing. The boys believed that the beast was a snake type of thing. And later they discovered the body of a man who had parachuted and he was stuck in the trees. And then the end, well, I think I'll leave that up to you. Then we come to character versus self. Character versus self. Characters usually undergo a struggle in making a decision about a certain situation that they're in. For example, Wiza versus self. He had to decide, make a decision whether he should return home and face his father after having been expelled from school. But then he decided he couldn't do that, and he decided to go to Lusaka and find a way to fend for himself as he waited for his brother Kocha to come back. The second example, Medza versus himself. As he realizes that After his mission, he can't fit into his homeland. He can't go back to his father's house and fit in because he had undergone so much change and did not agree with some of the rules and beliefs of his father. So he decides to leave along with his cousin, Zambo. In the third example, you have Nyambura versus herself. She decides not to get circumcised in order to be considered a woman in her society.
Mm.
And that is because she had seen her own sister, Utoni, die from an infection after circumcision. So these are the conflicts that characters go through, but you may find through different literatures, they break them down even further to specify what type of characters, or if it's decision making, what types of decisions that characters go through. Now we come to the next element of a story, which is character. What is character? A character in a literary piece of work can be a person, an animal, or a thing that performs actions and dialogue in the development of the plot of a story. Characterization is therefore a process by which the author creates, develops, and presents a character to the reader. So he does this through, like we've said, the actions and the dialogue.
Ela,
Let us go to the next part. We see just how this developmental process takes place. So the author will look at the following. The author looks at what a character says, what a character does, his actions, what people say about a character, and the physical appearance of the character. Now let's look at an
kwenda osamba.
example of this
Usakhala pa
development,
carpet. Ile kwa kitchen uko
and we
musamba.
will use
Manzi
Prose of
yavuye.
Desire by Sanyangwe. What a character says. When you read through the book, you will find Wiza talks about his dreams of earning degrees from prestigious universities, having a respected career, marrying the girl of his dreams. He constantly thinks about this